Black Moon Publishing presents the first in a series of podcasts discussing various esoteric topics. Today's topic is the enigmatic legacy of the Book of the Forgotten Ones by Nema Andahadna, 1977. Imagine discovering a mysterious occult manuscript that blends ancient mysticism with cosmic horror. But here's the twist. It was never actually published as a complete book. Today we're exploring the Book of the Forgotten Ones, a fascinating piece of modern magical history that challenges everything we think we know about occult texts.
That's such an intriguing starting point, and what makes it even more fascinating is how it intersects with H.P. Lovecraft's influence on modern occultism. It's like this perfect storm of mysticism and counterculture.
Let me tell you about the remarkable woman at the center of this story, Nema Andahadna, who claimed to have channeled this text through supernatural means, similar to how Joseph Smith received the Book of Mormon. She was deeply involved in Thelemic, Aleister Crowley's magical system.
And what's really compelling is that this wasn't even her first channeled text. In 1974, she had already received the Liber Penny Praenumbra, establishing her own Mart current.
You know what's fascinating about this? The Book of the Forgotten Ones isn't actually a single complete text. It's 3 separate chapters published over a decade in this niche publication called the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic. The first chapter contains these incredibly cryptic, almost poetic declarations.
Well, could you share some of those mysterious lines? I'm really curious about the actual content.
Here's one of the most striking passages. I am the motion of a leaf blown down an empty street. I am the sender of omens. Chant the incantation of my name. It will destroy you. Pretty chilling stuff, right? And later, Nema explained these forgotten ones as our basic survival urges, things like hunger, sex, fight or flight responses, that our intellectual minds tend to push aside.
So what you're saying is, she was essentially bridging ancient mysticism with modern psychology. That seems incredibly ahead of its time for the 1970s.
Exactly. And then things get even more interesting with the second chapter, Return of the Elder Gods. This is where the Lovecraftian elements start appearing, though not in the way most people might expect. The text suggests these elder gods in the macrocosm correspond to the forgotten ones in our personal unconscious.
That must have created quite a stir in the occult community, especially when Kenneth Grant got involved. How did practitioners reconcile these different interpretations?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The third chapter, written by A.H. in 1988, explicitly tries to separate these entities from Lovecraft's creations. He suggests that while Lovecraft might have glimpsed something real, he was ultimately eaten by these forces, rather than truly communicating with them.
That's such an evocative way of explaining the difference between Lovecraft's fearful approach and the more practical, magical approach that Nema was advocating.
You know what I find most compelling about this whole story? It's a perfect example of how magical texts evolve and take on new meanings over time. You've got this initial channeled material, then various interpretations and expansions, and finally this complex web of relationships between fiction, practical magic, and psychological understanding.
Let's not forget this was all happening during a really interesting period in occult history, when there was this explosion of new magical ideas and practices.
That's such an important point. This was a time when traditional ceremonial magic was being reimagined through the lens of psychology, chaos magic was emerging, and people were starting to take a more experimental approach to spiritual practice. The Book of the Forgotten Ones really reflects that zeitgeist.
So what do you think makes this particular text continue to fascinate people, even though it's never been published as a complete work?
I think it's precisely because of its fragmentary nature. The gaps in the text leave room for interpretation and personal meaning-making. It's like a magical Rorschach test, where practitioners can find their own truth while still working within certain established parameters.
That's a really thoughtful way of looking at it. The idea that sometimes the most powerful magical works are the ones that leave room for personal interpretation and growth.
And perhaps that's the real legacy of the Book of the Forgotten Ones. It reminds us that magic isn't just about following prescribed rituals or accepting established interpretations. It's about engaging with these ideas actively and using them as tools for understanding both ourselves and the universe around us. The following is a more comprehensive overview of the topic discussed in this podcast. The Book of the Forgotten Ones emerged as a significant occult text in the 1970s and 1980s, though not in the conventional sense of a single published volume. This mysterious work, channeled by medium Nema Andahadna, Nema Magick, appeared as 3 distinct chapters across different issues of the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magick, gaining attention in occult circles and Lovecraftian literary discussions. The first chapter, The Forgotten Ones, published in 1971 under the pseudonym Nahada 62, presented a series of ritualistic declarations and instructions. Unlike later editions, this initial text contained no overt references to the Lovecraft mythos, instead focusing on ceremonial magical practices with statements like, "I am the motion of a leaf blown down an empty street," and "Descend into my temple, meet yourself." This foundational text established the mysterious tone that would characterize the entire work. Nema Andahadna's background deeply influenced the text's development. As a practitioner of Thelema, Aleister Crowley's magical system, she had already channeled the influential Liber Pennae Praenumbra in 1974. Her involvement with the Bate Cabal in Ohio, co-founding the Horus Mart Lodge in 1979, and membership in Kenneth Grant's Typhonian Order positioned her at the intersection of various occult traditions. The second chapter, Return of the Elder Gods, an Invocation of the Forgotten Ones, 1978, marked a significant shift in the work's focus. Authored by Nema and the Shadow, this section introduced more explicit cosmic elements and explored the relationship between elder gods and forgotten ones. The text proposed that these entities represented macrocosmic and microcosmic forces, warning that they were clipothic in nature, embodying dark aspects of both the anti-universe and human unconscious. In her 1995 work, Magick, A Guide to Self-Initiation, Nema elaborated on the Forgotten Ones concept, describing them as fundamental survival urges often overlooked by human intellect. She connected these forces to ancient deities, suggesting that historical gods emerged from these primal energies, eventually gaining independent existence through centuries of worship. The final chapter, The Second Book of the Forgotten Ones, 1988, by Alan Holub, directly addressed the growing associations with Lovecraft's work. Holub explicitly attempted to distance the text from Lovecraftian fiction, arguing that while Lovecraft may have reached the portal of true communication with these forces, he was ultimately eaten by them rather than achieving genuine contact. This distinction became particularly important as occult practitioners sought to separate their practical work from fictional influences. Kenneth Grant took a markedly different approach in his work outside the circles of time, embracing rather than rejecting the Lovecraftian connections. Grant's interpretation helped spread awareness of the Book of the Forgotten Ones beyond its original occult audience, suggesting it contained allusions to mysteries, drawing from a complete grimoire existing just beyond ordinary awareness. The text's influence extended into various occult publications, including Robert North's New Flesh Palladium and the Book of Lies, the disinformation guide to magic and the occult. Unlike more widely available occult texts, such as various Necronomicon editions, the Book of the Forgotten Ones remained relatively inaccessible, adding to its mystique within occult circles. The significance of the Book of the Forgotten Ones lies not only in its content, but in how it exemplifies the complex relationship between channeled occult texts, established magical traditions, and the influence of weird fiction on modern occult practice. While some practitioners attempted to maintain clear boundaries between these elements, others embraced their interconnections, contributing to an ongoing dialogue between fictional and practical occultism that continues to influence contemporary magical traditions. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the enigmatic world of the Book of the Forgotten Ones. This exploration of Nema Andahadna's channeled text, with its blend of ancient mysticism, cosmic horror, and psychological depth, reminds us that magic is a living, evolving practice, one that invites us to question, interpret, and grow. If you're intrigued by the mysteries of the occult and the power of forgotten truths, visit Black Moon Publishing for more insights into esoteric history and transformative magical works. This has been a presentation of Black Moon Publishing.